Well, that was special, wasn't it? It was a special welcome. Yes. So before we get started, I want to acknowledge two very obvious people we should also applaud. Emma Watson, who was so wonderful as Meg, and Eliza Scanlen. Oh, poor girl. Such a wonderful cast. Thank you all for being here. I know it's no small feat to get all of you in the same room, so truly this is wonderful. And I have to say, and I'm sure a lot of us will agree, this movie, for me, brings up a lot of feelings, not the least of which is the idea that this still feels like a revolutionary act. Seeing this story, seeing the screen inhabited by all these women, and the men are sort of on the side. They're not the focus, and we see these women just busy and enjoying each other, and there's like a guy creeping in. But it's truly extraordinary, and it's something we don't see very often, so thank you for having the bravery to tell it again. It was very, very moving. Thank you. So Greta, tell me a little bit about the process, and obviously that's the small way of saying it, but you were hired to write the script first, and I'd love to know how you sold your vision to the studio to direct, because I love that Amy Pascal, who's also here tonight. Amy, where are you? I have to give you a round of applause. There she is. Oh no. Amy's on the floor. We can probably find you a chair, but if you're comfortable, you look good. Okay. She described your approach to the material as, quote, punk rock and Shakespearean. And I would love to know why you think she described it as such.
First of all, this is extraordinary. Thank you. And thank all of you. And I think I can't. I mean, I'm not. I don't think anyone would describe me as punk rock. And it would be so arrogant to call myself Shakespearean.
Amy said it. You did it. It's fine. Well, what was it about? I guess. How did you pitch yourself? What was your vision? Well, obviously, we see you play a lot with the narrative.
Sure.
Flashbacks. It's not beginning with the Christmas scene as we're used to seeing with these adaptations. Tell me why you open with that scene, which, by the way, is like every pitch meeting maybe a woman in Hollywood has ever been in. That the guy saying that the woman needs to die or be married by the end.
Married or dead. Yeah. That's how we like
but
our women.
But why that scene? And tell me how that informed your directing approach too.
Yeah. To me, the book when I reread it as an adult, so much of it was about. It just seemed so clearly to me to be about money. And women and money, and women and art and money. And how do you make art if you don't have money? And
how do you gain independence without money?
Without money. And I mean, the first line of the book is, Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents. It's so dreadful being poor. And it's a theme that continues the whole way. And then I spent a lot of time learning about Louisa May Alcott's life and what she did as a writer and what she did as someone who saved her family economically, and that she made these different decisions than her heroine did, and that she didn't get married and she didn't have children, but she made the very savvy economic decision to have Joe March get married and have children because that's the thing that was going to sell. And so when I went in to talk about the book, the thing I said was, this is what I see this film as being about, and it feels so incredibly pressing and modern and important to tell this story of these ambitious girls who want so much more than the world is able to provide them at this moment, and then how that. I think some writers get this. And I don't know where it comes from, but I feel when I read the text again, I think people remember it as being this kind of pre-Victorian morality of everything has a period and it's all tied up. But embedded in that is a lot that you forget how messy and wild it is. And some of the lines of Florence saying, I want to be great or nothing. And Marmee saying, I'm angry almost every day of my life. That's from the book. And
I think as young people reading it, I certainly didn't pick up on those intonations as a young person, and now it's like, wow.
And they're all there.
Intense. Right.
But yeah, and so anyway, and I'll just say one more thing about women and money because I think about it a lot. I'd also just read, it was a Virginia Woolf, Room of One's Own. Everyone remembers, it's like, to write you need a room of one's own. and 3,000 pounds a year that are unattached to anything. What she said is you need a room of one's own and money. And she says intellectual freedom depends upon material things. And poetry depends upon intellectual freedom. So women haven't had a dog's chance of writing poetry. And I feel like Little Women is the intersection of all of this. And anyway, I just wanted to bring that out. And sorry.
No. It's important. It's very important. And I think that theme plays very well and importantly.
I will say the pitch meeting went just about like that.
Well, whatever you did worked really well. So thank you for that. Saoirse, congratulations. Amazing. Another amazing performance. Really wonderful. You have said that your relationship with Greta allows you to do things that you never thought you'd be able to do. And I was wondering, how did this collaboration feel different from your previous one? And how did she push you in different ways? And obviously, she was pushing herself alongside of you, taking on such a large project.
I mean,
tell me how it felt different from Lady Bird.
I mean, I suppose the difference with this one was that we were both coming to this character for the first time. Lady Bird was such a personal thing for Greta, and I was absolutely petrified every day that I was messing it up. Not that I wasn't with Little Women, but I feel like it's a...
Well, by the way, I hear a lot of actors say that they were worried every day. What worried you specifically? Because obviously you were the right person. They cast you for a reason.
What, for Lady Bird?
No, for this movie
Joe.
as well. Yeah.
Just that I'd mess it up. And I also think like so many amazing people have played her in the past, and she is Louisa. And I think what was really wonderful for me about being involved in Greta's Little Women is that Louisa was so sort of infused in her character, and she, I think, she was like channeled through us, and we felt that on Lady Bird as well. We felt this character sort of like come through us, and the same thing started to happen with Joe. But I guess what was so wonderful about working with this girl with Greta at this time was that we were both in a place where we had both done a movie that neither of us had done before. Like I had never sort of ventured into something like Lady Bird before. It was Greta's first film, and we were going into this new thing really excited to just sort of keep going, and to have the structure that Greta gives you from one scene to the next is so helpful, because within that you've got so much freedom to play and to mess it up. And I think I was at a point sort of as an actor where like I had been doing it since I was 8, and I finally felt like I was ready to kind of go like, I'm going to just like fuck this up a bit, and I'm going to mess it up, and I'm going to just see what happens. And I wasn't as afraid of that. And I think that was because I was with someone that I trusted so much. So that's
great.
Yeah.
Well, it showed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Laura, our Marmee. Laura, from Amy Jellicoe to Renata Klein, you have played more than a few women who would say they're angry every day. You have sort of cornered the market on the being angry everyday character, but doing it with such grace and artistry. But I love this idea, and you quoted this line too, Greta. How does the way that anger manifests in Marmee reflect the era in which she lived? And how did she use that anger? It seems almost as if she used it in a productive way. And what can we learn from that? Because we see her giving back and being so conscious of generosity and service. So tell me how you thought about those themes.
You know, thanks to Greta, it began with history. I mean, it began with the truth of allowing us to be invited into the memory of Louisa and her family. We had the privilege of filming in Concord, Massachusetts, where, you know, the memories that played out in the story that inspired Louisa's life, we were literally walking the path of their memories. And the book allowed us into the truth of what it is to be a mother raising these girls, and yet I'd missed it as a child. I'd seen so much else, and yet I remembered Marmee as this angelic, omniscient being somehow. And Greta broke her wide open, like she did all of these characters, and yet revealed the thing that was in the book, which was what was so extraordinary, and a level of understanding and compassion and tolerance and openness about the things that are still complicated for people today. I mean, deep empathy. And from my perspective, rereading the book through Greta's words and then back into Louisa's words, it was about everything. It was about tolerance and sexuality and race and complication and revolution and doing it without money and doing it without men in the home and what that looked like. And it was so raw and so true and so bold. And yes, punk rock, and yes, Shakespearean, and also an homage to Louisa May Alcott. I don't know how she did it, but I just got to dive into that world with these extraordinary people, and be angry.
There's so many ways to be angry, as we've seen, so many different versions of that. And we saw a lot of versions on screen. In each of these characters, there's an anger, but it's an anger for a purpose, it seems. Working towards something and not just for the virtue of being closed in. You know?
And poetry as understanding and really wanting to allow what you see in your children to come forward, because you let them be all that they are, and instead of trying to truly raise them into something you've defined as what they're supposed to be. And that's a kind of mother I've never seen and really never really understood in the book. So Greta, I feel, truly gave us that Marmee and that relationship with the girls in a way I had not really understood, and was so lucky to be part of that.
Thank you, I agree. Meryl, I would love to know, what do you think it is about the way, oh, I'm sorry, were you guys, oh, okay. Wasn't that wonderful?
Such a great, yeah.
I know, it takes, if we had more time, we could do this for like 10 hours. I wish we did. I would love to know what you think it is about the way Greta directs that you think reflects the way she herself performs as an actor. It's not often you get to work with a director who's also an actor. How did that seep into her approach as a director, that you felt?
Well, she let me do what I wanted. So,
Actors love that, don't they?
actors really like
You
that.
really do love that.
So
right.
she won me over immediately. No, she. We talked quite a bit about the underpinnings. I'm all about the money. I mean, not me, but Aunt March is all about the money. Right.
And unadulteratedly so. She's fine with it. It's all she talks about. It's how she measures value.
Well, it's how the world measures value. And so she is the reality check on all the airy-fairy, highfalutin, idealistic people that populate her family. And that she basically underwrites. She underwrites their life. She makes it possible. Like many people who are thwarted in her own life, she gets her own back. She gets a revenge, and it's because women didn't have agency. I mean, at that time in the Civil War, a woman, you could get divorced, you could get a divorce, but everything, including the dress on your back, was your husband's property. By default, that was the including your children. So you could leave, but you left with nothing. And so they had nothing. And for a woman to marry, that was the only thing they could do to support themselves. And so Aunt March is looking at these girls. What's going to happen to them? And she's picking winners, She really, and she... No, you
wrote the
lost,
book, though,
babe,
like?
because she got the house. She got the house. is all I
She
can say.
did.
The house, yeah.
I do want to see what happens next, though. I feel like there's a sequel brewing here at some point. Well, thank you, Meryl. That's beautiful and very on point. So Florence, speaking of, I would love to, your character is so verbose and, dare I say, a little bratty at times, and it makes her endearing, of course. But I would love to know how you helped to develop her cadence and her speaking style and her presentation, and just generally, too, what sort of accent training did you receive to nail this very specific time and place, to not have it sound like this kind of faux British and sort of like, too early to mid-Atlantic accent? Like, how did you capture her sound?
How did I capture her sound? I didn't go through extensive lessons. I think straight away, one of the coolest things about getting to read for this job and to meet Greta and to meet Amy was that straight away, I knew, and everybody that's read the book knows, that Amy is seen as the best but the worst child, and she's a brat, and she's rude, and she says all the right but the wrong things. And the most amazing thing about doing this job was straight away Greta said, I don't feel like Amy had the moment to express herself as to why she felt the way that she did. And that was straight away. So everything about Amy came from the scenes that I was allowed to read early on to do the audition tapes. I had an idea of who she was in my head, and I had a way of standing, and I had a way of speaking, and I sent those tapes in, and I'm happy to say that the tapes that I sent in were pretty similar in terms of like who I was in that moment to what we did as Amy on the day. And I think that's just one of those magical moments where you see a character the same way that the directors and the creators see the character, and that doesn't always happen. And I think I was very lucky in finding myself a team that totally supported what I and what they were all thinking. And in terms of the accent, we all had an amazing a dialect coach. And we would just talk to each other in the accent, not 24 hours, but I think we all had a very similar way of how we wanted them to speak. We didn't want them to be too uppity. We didn't want them to sound like they were in corsets. They wanted to be natural and real and raw, but they also had to be from that era. And I think one of the coolest things about getting on set was that the way that Greta wrote, on the page, there would be lines that were literally on top of one another. And I didn't really, I thought that it was a mistake. I was like, oh, Greta, she's forgot to press the space button again. And I wasn't there during rehearsal period. And I remember Saoirse, I hadn't properly met Saoirse yet, but I had known her and met her at events. And I remember Saoirse being like, yeah, rehearsals are pretty intense, and this is happening. I was like, why are they so intense? And then I spoke to Greta on the phone, and Greta was like, yeah, because everybody's learning the lines. The way that I wrote the lines, you have to say the line when someone says the line. So when you say the, and the line underneath says and, you have to say the line the and then and at the same time. And I'm then like flicking through all the pages going, oh my God, there are 5 lines on top of one another where all of us come in on different cues. And that's what it was like every single day. So you've got all these like accents with these corsets and these modern ways and old ways of talking, and we're all talking over the top of one another, and it was so thrilling to be on set every single day. And because all of us were in it and we're all from different places in the world, somehow it worked. That usually doesn't work. But it did, and it was exciting. And Timmy yesterday said that acting on this set, with Saoirse, was a sport. And I will say, even though I wasn't in their scenes when he said that, on this film, it was a sport to do a group scene because you had to be on it, you had to have your caffeine in you, and you had to be ready because if you missed your line on the word and, Greta was gonna come towards you and tell you very quickly. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I said some stuff.
It doesn't matter because you're very entertaining, so that's all that matters.
Thank you.
So Timothée, hello, how are you?
Good. Thank you. Yes, good.
The lone wolf on the stage. You're holding up very well, I must say. So Laurie and Joe's relationship for me is one of the most beautiful and groundbreaking, I think, ever written because of its bucking of feminine and masculine norms in terms of their energy and the way they relate to each other. I hear you and Saoirse swapped clothing during filming. Is this true? And tell me why, and how did that affect the way you sort of started to perceive Laurie and learn more about him?
Oh, I love that question. I can't say that was our idea. I think it was Greta's idea that they'd be swapping clothing.
I had a feeling, yes.
And we had an amazing costume designer. I don't want to mispronounce her name, Jacqueline Dern, is that how you would say it? And that's the only experience I've ever had in a movie where I would get to my trailer and I'd have maybe 3 clothing options hanging, and she would kind of let us mismatch and try to find it. And if it didn't work, there's an Easter egg of a scene in the movie where there's some sort of accoutrement happening on my wrist. That's there half the scene, and then it'll disappear. Because Greta came over to me and said, "What the hell's on your wrist?" So,
You were accessorizing too much? Is this?
Well, I know, yeah. It was like, me and Jacqueline were kind of like, "Do you think we could sneak this in?" But then Greta caught it, and it was fucked up. It was scary.
Was it an eye watch? What was it? Something
You'll
modern?
see? No.
Okay, I guess we'll have to watch it again.
Yeah.
But tell me what you learned more about Laurie that maybe you hadn't seen in previous iterations or from the book, and maybe a way, and again, using the word, opened up this character in a new way for you.
I don't know. This isn't a dodge when I say it's the things I learned were an absence of, and not so much that we're conscious, or that's what I love about this character is there isn't the formulation of being a modern man. There isn't a formulation, it just is. And when you're young, you kind of figure out your personality. It's like people are your mirrors, and you see yourself in the mirrors. And I think Laurie is giving these girls as much a mirror as they're giving him, and an ability to figure himself out, and absent whatever our modern norms of toxic masculinity and stuff like that would be. Yeah.
Thank you. Well said. Greta, I would love for you to tell us who Judith Margaret Cameron is. And I would love to know the role that she played in her work in informing the look of these characters in their hair and their costumes.
It's Julia Margaret.
Oh, excuse
Cameron.
me, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Sorry, no. Well, I'm so glad you asked. She is a photographer who took these incredible photographs of mainly women in the 1860s in London, and she, or outside of in England, but they're the most extraordinary photographs. And when I was working with Jacqueline Dern, she brought all of these photographs out, and you can't believe it. They all look like they were taken yesterday. They just look like girls. Their hair's messy. They have kind of annoyed expressions sometimes. They're not necessarily paying attention. And there was something about the immediacy of these women that she captured. And I always think it's interesting. I often find in art forms, before they become official, you'll find women in them, and then as soon as they become official, the men are like, hang on, we've got it from here, thank you. But it's true. But so, no one was really treating photography as an art form, but she was. And there was another woman, Lady Harwerton, who was also treating it as an art form, using light in the way that, photographers now use light, not just using it as a piece of like a scientific documentation, but anyway, art, and so that kind of, we wanted that feeling of her girls, her messy hair, her skin that you can feel. That was a big inspiration, but so much of the movie is nerdily footnotable. Like there's a hat that Jo wears when she's gonna go to the theater, but then when she comes in with her haircut, and that's a reproduction of a hat that was in a Winslow Homer painting, which I loved, that Jacqueline recreated. Or there's a scene when they're all on the beach. There's a Winslow Homer painting on Massachusetts on the beach, on the Eagle Head, and it's this, and you can't believe it. You see there's a girl like wringing out her dress and a dog, and it feels like, oh, right, these were modern people. And I think paintings really helped to capture that. And I just, it was such a pleasure with Jacqueline Dern and Jess Goncher, who did the production design, to really delve into the research and then bring everyone into it. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it was something that I was able to show during the rehearsal period and talk about about just them as people. I mean, they were no different, and so much. I didn't want the actors to feel like they had to be nailed to the floor, and I didn't want any of the costumes to feel that way, or the lighting. I wanted it to feel totally accurate, but also completely light on its feet.
I love that. And it's so funny you say that, because it doesn't feel stiff. It feels very lived in and very homey. I kept wanting to live in that house. Was I the only person who thought, I wish I could just move in?
Me too.
It's so cozy and homey.
It was so hard to be the director because you can't really be part of it.
You can't warm your feet by the fire while you're directing.
I had to stand away, and then I suddenly realized, like, you have to leave, and we have to shoot.
We need you to step out of the frame, yes. So I would love to know, and anyone can answer this, who had the strangest or most unique way of getting into character on set? This could be a ritual, perhaps some music you listen to, jumping jacks, eating something strange, whatever comes to mind.
Well, I will say...
She ate Wendy's one day. I wasn't there.
Yeah, I love how you're
did
telling
an
the
interview
story.
recently, and they thought I was in it, and they were like, so what about the Wendy's that Meryl ordered on set? So you did that.
I was saving money.
It's all about money.
I feel like Timothée was always trying to slip in other costume changes. And he'd come up to me and say, Yo, Wayne Gretzky, is it okay if I wear all these rings? I'd be like, nope, take them off.
Saoirse and I would wrestle occasionally.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we hit each other a
A lot. Yeah.
The scene where she's burned the story and we have to wrestle.
It was like one of the last weeks of shooting, and it was the scene where we had to wrestle. And Saoirse and I had been really excited about doing this scene because
like
we'd been wanting to fight for a really long time in a loving way, And then just before it started, I went up to her and I was like, Saoirse, hit me. And she was like, what? And I was like, hit me in the face. She goes, really?
And she was like, make it hard.
And we went and double-checked with the camera guys. And we were like, are you framing up on this, yeah? Because she's going to hit me in the face. And we did it, and she hit me. She was like, oh, no, you're welling. It's like, it's okay, it felt great.
We both kind of loved it, though. It was great.
A lot of eating.
Yes.
Everyone ate a lot.
Yeah, we ate more than we should have done. We ate a lot of ice cream.
And what were you eating?
It was really tasty.
Yeah, what was Crafty preparing for you on set?
You know that big scene when they come back and the Lawrences have given them like every time I look over, Florence and Saoirse would both have a ball of ice cream that they'd be
like
shoving into their mouth. Yes, and
you ate a lot of popcorn.
Yeah.
I would say it was a very emotional, beautiful set, but it was like, but Laura really held us together.
Yeah.
Like literally, Laura held us together. Everyone turned to her. Everyone.
And is that a lot of responsibility, Laura?
I was just pretending to play the part. I don't think they realized they were holding me together, but it was very beautiful.
And then if there was the peak moment of method was everyone got strep throat, which is the precursor to scarlet fever.
Whoa. And you were able to avoid that on set.
Yes. Well, yep.
That's very much getting into character, so well done.
The other thing is that you were pregnant, and none of us knew it.
I did.
The whole time.
You knew on the last day.
No, I dreamt it.
Oh, yeah, she
I dreamt it. And Greta thought that I knew, and I had caught her out on set, and I didn't know I had actually dreamt it.
No.
I know.
But then the last day, I was in your trailer, and I was like, do you think Greta might be pregnant? Because she's wearing like 7 layers of clothes every single day.
I know, and it was cold, but it wasn't that cold.
It wasn't that cold. Yeah. And then you told me.
And
She
Greta, how
kept it-
difficult
she
was
honestly
that?
kept it a secret
Was
the
that a
whole time.
hard layer to add to your already busy job?
She wrote it, she directed it.
She made a human.
And she made a baby all the time. And I mean...
That was part of the pitch to Amy, right? I'm going to get pregnant and have a baby.
I had to tell them all that it was. No, I just wore giant coats, and everybody just thought I was getting really big. They were just...
But she'd eat like one whole roast chicken, literally every day. And on Lady Bird, she'd have like 6 packets of Cheetos a day. And then suddenly we were on Little Women, and I was like, "Oh, you've got like a chef, and you've got like roast chicken and salad for lunch every day." I was like, "Who are you?" And it was only because she was pregnant that she was having it.
Yes, that's right. No, it was. I got a text message at the end from the production designer who said, "I thought you had something up the coat."
Well, Louisa May would be even more impressed, so well done.
That is true.
So we don't have a ton of time, but I did want to close with one question and posing it to everyone. It's interesting to me, there are around 40 movies contending for Best Picture this year, give or take, and only 2 of them have casts of female actors, ensembles, true ensembles. Little Women and Hustlers.
I can't wait to see Hustlers. Have you seen it? Oh yeah, should we go see it?
One, of course, centers on New York strippers who drug their male clients to steal their money. And the other is about transcendentalist-era women who dream of living in a world where they are equal to men. Same. In all seriousness, what does it mean to see these 2 movies exist at the same time? What does it tell us about how far we've come, but also how much more work we have to do on this front? Because I find it a little distressing that these are our 2 options. That's a great movie, by the way, super fun, but there could be like a in-between story there, maybe. Maybe, I don't know.
I think at this moment it's never been a better moment to be a woman who wants to write or a woman who wants to direct. It's taken us. We have a lot longer to go, but at this moment, this is the best times, and I'm very heartened by so many filmmakers and storytellers and actors, and to me, I think of the girls right now who are 15 who are going to make movies, and by the time we get to their movies, it will be completely upended.
And I have to say, when I walked in the theater tonight, there was a throng of about 15-year-old girls on the corner with a book in hand, hoping to see the people on the stage and get an autograph. But the fact that they were holding the book felt special and really beautiful.
And I want to be as a woman who wants to write and as a woman who wants to direct, I stand on so many people's shoulders who came before me. But for me, I wouldn't do it. Louisa made it possible. Like Louisa writing the story of her life and her sisters and giving it space on the page and saying that women's internal lives are worth something. That's incredible, and it is this it's this female utopia, and she gave it space, and she didn't even know really, but that's how these things work. I think sometimes the future reaches down and pulls you forward.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.